Hello, Whitefish. It's been a minute. Well, I recently returned from a little family vacation up at the legendary Tally Lake Lodge. It's a real mountain paradise up there with great views, buttery pancakes, a great gift shop with nifty t-shirts, and of course, spectacular fishing. I was able to teach my daughter our signature family cast, developed over many generations. Scares the fish right into your net. Today's guest is a newcomer to town, but already making a big impact. Daniel Sidder is the executive director of Housing Whitefish, a nonprofit that advocates, creates, and plans for the sustainable supply of housing that everyone in our community can afford. He's here to talk about our town's housing crisis and how Housing Whitefish hopes to address a variety of the issues related to this complex situation. Today's episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. Thrivers Coffee is an organic, fair trade blend roasted right here in Whitefish, Montana, with all profits going to combat human trafficking. Visit thriverscoffee.com to order your coffee and make a difference in the fight against human trafficking. Thank you for coming on Hello Whitefish. This is an important episode. Hot topic, affordable housing. So let's break down some basics. Why is Whitefish having an affordable housing crisis?
Big question. I don't know if there is a basic answer either.
Yeah.
I think the way that I've been starting to think about it recently is I think this goes back to the financial crisis. I mean, I've only been here since October. But people, sounds like, have been talking about housing issues in this area for a while. And it seems like, it was kind of just like linear growth, like, okay, a little bit of growth. Housing crisis came 2008 through 2012, crashed, and everybody was like, oh, like we don't have a problem anymore. And then over time, through the what do they call it? The aughts? Is it?
Yeah.
through the aughts.
I just learned that term too.
Through the aughts, it's like, oh, like there's a bigger challenge coming. And my perception is Whitefish just was in the wait. We're just going to wait and we'll just kind of see what happens. We'll see if this changes or maybe people won't fully discover us. Like maybe we'll just keep waiting. And I think people were talking about planning. Like I think there's a lot of people like, hey, like maybe we should consider this, or maybe we should consider that. Like, what are some things? And now, the pandemic was this perfect storm of low interest rates, people, remote work, Montana was open for business. Like this whole perfect storm kind of happened and this happened everywhere. And this is what I want to reiterate to people is like,
totally.
This has happened across the country.
Yep, it really has.
It's magnified here. But now we're in this point where we're trying to act, we're reacting, but we didn't plan. And so everything is feeling dramatic and like, what do we do? And it's like, well, we didn't set up a structure. We didn't set up a whole policy, we just didn't plan. And so now we're reacting. And now we're reacting to the plans that we've made hastily. And so that's kind of my 2 cents is like, we're just in this spot now where we're going, oh, like now we actually need a plan, actually need to think about stuff, and we actually have some people that are here to do it. I think that's also been the other thing.
Yeah, people have been talking about it. When we had the mayor on, they were doing studies that as far back as 2016, he said they were 900 workforce individuals coming in from outside of Whitefish back then. And, Whitefish did try to do some planning, but then they had that huge wrench thrown in I think it was 2016 with House Bill 259, which was written by Sue Vinton, which revised property and zoning laws. And the first line of the bill says that this is an act prohibiting a local government from requiring builders to provide housing for specific income levels. And Whitefish had a program that was doing exactly that.
The inclusionary zoning, legacy homes. Mm-hmm. It did. And if you ask the city and if you ask folks how many units were actually produced out of that.
How many were?
Not many. Almost, or not. Like people were just giving the money.
Yeah.
Cash in lieu of is what they called it.
Oh, that's right.
And so we get in this a little bit, but like that legacy homes program, and this is something I'm kind of working with the city on, is how do we, like, when you actually read and use the examples that they have, it's like, you can go from 26 parking spots to 23. You can go from 8 units to 9.8 units. And it's like, well, what's 9.8? Does that round down? Does that round up?
Yeah.
So like the actual incentive, and now it's builders or developers can just do it, and it's kind of like hey, look at this benefit that we're doing here.
Yeah.
But it's really not that much of an incentive for folks.
Interesting. Huh.
So that's something that I'm kind of keen on looking at with the city is like, what's a real incentive?
Right.
You know, like how many more units, how many more parking spots can you take away?
Yeah.
That's actually going to help us here.
That's so interesting. So it's cool. So you're actually a new member of the community.
I am.
You just moved here in October, so you're not quite a year. So how did you end up in Whitefish?
Well, ended up in the Valley. So
In the Valley, yep.
Was living in Corvallis, Oregon
Cool.
with my wife and daughter and dog Hazel.
Nice.
Shout out Hazel. No, but we, my wife got a job with the National Park Service at Greatfish
awesome.
National Park.
Awesome.
So when we met in 2012, she was like, I want to work for the Park Service. I want to be the director one day. I don't know if she still wants to be the director.
Yeah. That's a tough job.
Yeah. But, just over the last 10 years, we've, moved around quite a bit for her opportunities, and she finished her PhD, and so got this job, and so we were like, yeah, let's go for it.
Awesome.
And then, about 2 weeks after she had accepted the job, it was about this time last year, I had seen the position at Housing Whitefish pop up for a director, and it was like, wow, that's like checks all the boxes for things that I've done and my experiences.
Awesome.
So yeah, we ended up in Columbia Falls. A little easier for her to get up the canyon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I mean, we looked in Whitefish. We would have liked to end up here, but you know, just between rents and trying to buy anything, it was just going to be too far out of our price range. So
how ironic.
Yeah, so we ended up in Columbia Falls.
Well, it's not a bad spot to end up.
Yeah.
So what is Housing Whitefish?
Yes. Housing Whitefish is a 501c3 nonprofit. And our goal is really to be nonprofit developers, and that's what we're working towards.
Cool.
So we were spun out of the Housing Authority. And so really there was the Housing Authority as they were starting to get into different projects and programs, or like, starting to see the limitations either inside their internal capacity or just like with their current workload. And they said, we need a separate organization that can fundraise a little bit more creatively, be a little bit more nimble.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's found a new organization essentially. And so Housing Whitefish came out of that. And really the goal, and how we talk about it is we want to be projects and programs.
Awesome.
We want to be the ones implementing and getting shit done.
Yep.
So that's really, that's not our mission, but getting shit done. But we really want to be the ones that are, on the ground doing the work to actually house people and help people live in the community.
That's amazing. So what's the difference between Housing Whitefish and Shelter Whitefish?
Yeah. So Shelter Whitefish, they are I think 501c4, which is lobbying.
Yep.
So they are technically, they can just go all out on lobbying and advocacy.
Oh, okay.
And that's really where they're at, right? Like if you see a lot of their messaging, a lot of their stuff is really focused on grassroots organizing, getting people involved, getting people talking about, housing. And, there's kind of this YIMBY, yes in my backyard, which is kind of the counter to the NIMBY, not in my backyard. I'd classify them kind of as in that YIMBY of yes, we want it all. We need more housing. And so they're really advocacy and, outreach, grassroots, trying to get people involved in the conversation. And then for us, we're going to be the ones that are, working with them on a lot of these policy issues to say, hey, can we have smaller lot sizes? Can we go a little bit higher? Can we have some narrower lots? Can we be a little bit more creative in our zoning standards? And then we'll be the ones implementing and actually building.
Oh, that's so cool. So that's really interesting to see that those two organizations exist because we need them. We need someone at the state level.
Yes.
And is it Nathan Dugan who's on the task force?
Yes, Nathan. He's on the state. Yeah, exactly.
The housing task force.
Housing task force with GM Forte.
Yeah. What is the housing task force attempting to do? for Greg Gianforte?
Yes.
Are they kind of just in the exploratory phase of how they can work with developers and do it in a way that doesn't infringe on property rights, that sort of thing?
Well, there were quite a few things in the past legislative session, and I don't remember all the bill numbers generally, but
Yeah.
I'd say on the whole, they're really looking at ways to minimize regulation to make it easier. So I would say on the whole, their thing was really trying to focus on supply,
Okay.
right? So
Yep.
how, like in economic world, like how do we create more supply? Maybe decrease regulation, smaller lot sizes, allow ADUs. So there was a lot of things that I think were good,
Yeah.
coming out of the state housing policy.
Huh.
So there was actually 819, which is the coal trust. There's more money available for lending for affordable housing developments. So that was a really big deal, having like some just more funding available. And then ADUs up to 1,000 square feet by right
That's a good one.
was really good. And there's a number of others that were like, okay, like we're, states that have been trying to do this like reform looked and were like, wow, Montana did like 4 like pretty big things in terms of development here that other states have been trying. So, there has been some progression there. I think the other side, the local control, because right, there's kind of this top-down approach that's like, all municipalities need to allow ADUs at 1,000 square feet on every lot, essentially,
Yeah.
and taking away parking requirements. And there's this local control conversation about what can we do locally? What decisions are we allowed to make?
Right.
And I think that's a really interesting dynamic, not only here, but in communities really across the country.
Yeah.
Of like nobody necessarily wants to be told what to do and like want to have some agency.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I think my opinion, there are some things that it's nice to just have the state be like, no, like these are the rules and this is how you need to conform to it.
Yep. Whitefish implemented a resort tax that has been very beneficial to the town. It's raised us a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
How that was passed is because of the allocation for property tax rebates.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some shakeup happening with the resort tax. Can you kind of give us an update on what's happening there to the best of your ability?
Yes,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. So resort tax has been, you probably know the years. I should know the years. Was it in the 80s, 90s?
No, it was early aughts, I think.
Okay,
late 90s, early aughts.
Okay, so the resort tax, and really a big selling point for that, a lot of folks, was the property tax rebate, 25%. So I think over time there's been 6 times that it's gone back to voters to be amended. One of those was for the Haskell Basin bond, and so that was 23% of the 3%. In 2025, that's expiring.
Okay.
And so we have an opportunity as a community to say, all right, this 23% is going off. We're not going to have to, pay it anymore. And so how do we want that resort tax dollars to be allocated? And so what we're proposing and what we're working with the city on is saying, hey, paths, roads, Whitefish Trail, all going to see an increase. And we would like to add community housing to get money, which would be, $27 million over 20 years.
That's not a small figure.
It's not. And I think there's...
So that'd be about 2.8 a year or 2.5 a year.
I think at the top end. So in the first year, it'd be like 800 something thousand.
Sure.
And then the projections would be like 1 million up 1.2, 1.3, just with that growth.
Sure.
So there's definitely conversation and people, advocating to go after the property tax rebate.
Sure.
And
to actually go after that. Okay, so it's not just the bond, but also cutting into the property tax.
So I don't think there's going to be the appetite at the council, and I don't think that that's going to end up being on the ballot. So, but there are, Shelter Whitefish and some other housing advocates that are starting to say, hey, how about, because there's a lot of folks that are receiving money out of state.
Right. I saw those numbers that they posted, like some people getting thousands of dollars sent to places outside of Montana.
I think my only pushback on that is also what percentage of the city budget are those folks, paying through their property taxes?
Sure.
And how much are they actually using in terms of services?
Oh, that's an interesting way to
So,
look at it.
So again, I'm not saying that's like a reason to send money out of state to out-of-state property owners for second homes. But at the same time, like I want to say it's like close to 30% of all property taxes coming into the city is from, potentially second homes and others. So I think it's just a double-edged sword in that, where it's, I do think there's a more equitable way to distribute the rebate.
Sure.
It could just be flat. Everybody gets equal amounts. But I think just the challenges in the time period that we see now is for the city to figure out that mechanism. It's going to take a lot.
Right.
And what we'd like to see is for money to be dedicated for community housing right now. And while we wouldn't be able to actually access that till 2025, we want to see that dedicated. We want to see the community say, no, this is important. And also we can continue that conversation about the property tax rebate, do some more research and really figure out like, how can we address this?
Right.
But yeah, we really just want to see that 10% and then leverage that, right? Because if we can take $1 million a year, then we can start to go to donors. We can use that as leverage and match for different types of grants, which is just going to bring more money into the community.
And being a nonprofit puts you in an interesting financial position where once you start generating revenue, you have more incentives because you're going to have better tax breaks. So can you give me an example of, do you guys have any projects in the works? Can you kind of give me an example of how Housing Whitefish works with the city and developers to make a project come to fruition?
Yes, glad that you asked. So we're right now working on a property that's 0.61 acres right behind Piggyback Barbecue.
Oh, cool.
So the first phase of this is the Alpenglow Apartments.
Okay.
First phase was completed, I think, in 2021. It was a project that was done by the Housing Authority, and they also partnered with Homeward out of Missoula. And they're a really big nonprofit developer in the state of Montana. I'd say they're a leader definitely in the field here.
Oh, great.
And so that was a really big project. It was a tax credit project, and just a lot went into that. But the Housing Authority retained, this 0.61 acre lot. I'm not quite sure why it wasn't part of the first phase, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be working as Housing Whitefish on developing that lot. So we've hired our architects. We're working with Cushing Terrell. I'm not sure. I should ask them. And so we have our site design and conceptual that we're getting, working on. And we'll be going hopefully in front of the city for site review, which is that initial like, what do you think? How's this looking? Hopefully in August.
Cool.
And so
that's great.
Yeah. So we're starting to really take these steps. Concurrently, we're working on our finance and financial package. Affordable housing is not like traditional housing in terms of usually like the finance mechanisms, because somebody has to subsidize it, right? The rents that folks are paying or the mortgages that folks are paying on the whole aren't covering the costs to actually build and develop.
Okay.
And so that's why there's money from the federal government, money from the states, philanthropy to actually fill the gap to make it affordable. And so I think that's just kind of a misconception oftentimes.
Yep.
Is, people are always like, well, why isn't it affordable? It's because the cost of land, the cost of labor, the cost of materials, all of these things, the process that we have to, go through to get things approved adds time and money. And so at the end of the day, this is my thing in Whitefish, like if you can build luxury and it's going to sell, if you're already going to go through the headache and the process and the investment, you're just going to go ahead and make it luxury and it's still going to sell.
Right.
Right?
That's the world we live in.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
And so there's really no incentive to do anything less than.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. At this point in time. And maybe that will change as the market changes. So what we're looking at is, for this project, we'd like to, one, try to get some traditional financing, construction loan, permanent loan from some of the local banks.
Yep.
And so we are working on our pro forma, which is just the estimates on how much money we can bring in over time, and what we'd be able to support with debt, right? And so we essentially have a break-even plan of like, hey, we could do this and it's going to break even. It's not going to bring in much revenue. It'll be pretty tight, but we can build it. What we'd like to do for this first project, and is really to ask the community to support this.
Okay.
And what the income limits that we're looking for, and we talk about area median income. A lot of the state and federal funds are targeting folks for rentals at like 60% of the median income.
Okay.
So it's going to be folks, I have my chart here.
Yeah. I love data.
Okay. So at one person at 60% is making $35,000.
That's a low number in this day and age.
Yes. Right. So at 100%, that's just shy of 60,000,
Sure.
about 58. So what we're really seeing is that people in the city's needs analysis really highlighted this, that there are renters that are struggling up to 120% of the median income.
Yep.
So that'd be a couple making $80,000, right? And based off of 30% of their income, which is kind of the standard, like 30% of your income towards housing expenses. If you're just making 100%, that's $1,600.
$1,600.
So
yep.
You don't really see that.
No.
In town. Right?
Not at all.
So
I don't even know in the valley where you could get that. Maybe Kalispell or Evergreen.
Yeah. So what we're looking at is, probably likely to be under 120%.
Yep.
But there's not the subsidies at the state level or the federal to support rentals there. And so if we raise probably a little bit shy of $4 million from the community, then we're going to be able to have, one, more control over the rents. We can keep them lower. We're going to have more control over just the whole process because we're not going to be having any debt. And we're actually going to be able to take any money that's earned and reinvest it right away back into our other projects and programs.
Okay, amazing.
So that's really our pitch right now is like, if we don't have to carry debt on this first project, we can, that's going to be a lot of money that we're just going to be able to turn around and reinvest.
And $4 million is a lot of money, but it's actually doable.
It is.
It's very doable.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So $4 million will just really kind of help launch things so that the engines are running and you can get the whole program off the ground.
Honestly, that's probably hopefully conservative.
Yeah.
Our estimates is actually a little bit lower.
Sure.
And we are also getting the land for free from the Housing Authority.
Oh, okay.
So that is not part of that equation for us. So we're really open. And our plan 1B is that what does it look like if we can just also have a donor as our bank, right? So if somebody's like, hey, I can't write you that check, but I would be willing to loan at a much lower rate than what you could get, just kind of through a loan from the community banks.
Right.
We would definitely be interested in exploring that, right? Because just the lower, I think as we all know, the lower the interest rate, it just, helps that bottom line.
And the interest rate is not low right now.
No, it's really a terrible time.
Yeah.
To try and do this.
That's a great idea. Boy, gosh, if I had the money, that'd be a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, just let me know once it comes in.
I will. I think the Mega Millions is almost up to $1 billion. So
right.
Got to get that ticket. So that's interesting. So then what about assistance programs? Are there any assistance programs in the works? Is that something that you could also do to work with people that are already renting?
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. We got projects and programs. So the project is, right now it's Alpenglow phase 2.
Okay.
Community. If you have any names that you'd like to see, the one that I'm workshopping is Bedrock. The Bedrock.
Ooh, okay.
Bedrock Apartments.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel like, the bedrock is sturdy. It's, it's like at the end of the day, you'll reach the bedrock. And so I feel like that's like a good, like, hey, for folks that are living and working here that are the bedrock, the backbone of the community.
Oh,
so that's
a
my
good one, brother.
That's my working name. But
Okay.
if there are other ideas, would love to entertain it. So there's that one. And then the program aspect is the Whitefish Workforce Assistance Fund. And so we're essentially modeling a program from Winter Park, Colorado. And really the goal is to just help people afford rent. So as we were talking about, I mean, if you're a one person and you're making, 80% of the median income, you're making $47,000, right? And if you're paying 30% of your income towards rent, you shouldn't be paying more than $1,100 in rent.
Oh man.
And so there certainly are folks that are maybe sharing a home or roommate situation, but there are a lot of folks that are paying more than that. And so what we'd like to say is
single moms, single parents.
Lots of folks, right? So what we'd like to say is like, okay, this is your income. You're paying more than 30% of your rent or your income towards rent. Let's cover the difference.
Okay.
Right. So if you're paying $1,400, but 30% of your income is $1,100, we'll fill in the gap at $300. We'll help to bridge that gap. And so what we're looking at would be, helping to support folks that are on a 6-month lease or more.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be direct payments to landlords. So it would just buy down rent for that period of time. Folks can apply once a year. So we're right now gotten a lot of feedback on it and kind of working on the administration and operational and kind of the fundraising aspect too, right? Because we're going to ask the city for money for that one to kick that going, but we'd also like the community to help match that money.
Sure. If someone wanted to apply, would they have to submit like a tax return or just check stubs?
Yeah, both. So we're trying to keep it simple, but we're looking at tax return to see, what your gross income was from the last year, pay stubs, and then also a lease.
Oh yeah, yep.
Right. It's like, yes, I have a lease, and also landlord information.
Yep.
We'd like, ideally where we'd like to go with this is having the relationships with the landlords.
Okay,
as well.
That's good. Yep.
And I think we, short-term rental landlords, we'd really like to figure out how can we get those people to a year lease.
Mm-hmm.
How can we just
the golden egg of Whitefish, a year lease?
How can we get you to a year? What will it take? And so I'm hopeful that by starting to launch this program, having a pool, hopefully, of people that are renters, that are living here, that are looking for long-term housing, how can we just start to get folks in those units?
And how do you incentivize homeowners? And, as we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of people that come to Whitefish just because they know this is an incredible investment opportunity. Yeah. If you have the opportunity to buy multiple homes and turn those into short-term rentals, it's a very attractive thing to do. And, money talks. And even for first-time homeowners, this is like as we were talking about, a wealth-generating tool, yes. Probably one of the best ones that you can have in this day and age. Mm-hmm. Not everyone can have a stock portfolio, but being able to own a house is an amazing thing to do. So
there are other communities that are doing, essentially they're buying them, not buying them from the homeowners, but they're saying, okay, so we'll pay you to transition this to from a short term to a long term.
Oh, okay.
So Big Sky's doing this. There's a company that comes in and will help communities do this, like Breckenridge, Truckee, some of these other big resort towns are contracting with them, and they target homeowners with the second homes or the short-term rentals, and they pay them.
Wow.
They just say, we're going to give you, sometimes it's like $10,000, $15,000.
Jeez.
The difference, because you're looking at what's the difference that you can make from your short-term to the long-term. Yeah. And they cover the gap.
How would a company like that make money? Is it a nonprofit or a...
They make money off their administration fee.
Okay.
Which the city's balked at a little bit. It's $90,000. And then there's also the money that you actually have to allocate to do it. So It would probably be $300,000, $400,000 a year to start. So that has been the barrier. Some communities have tried to just do it on their own, and Big Sky has done it on their own. But I think there's some optics with this too. And I think there has been some pushback on this where it's like, well, you're just giving people money that don't need the money to capture a unit. I can understand the end goal is to have a long-term rental. But I think it doesn't sit well with some folks that you're just like giving people money that frankly don't need it oftentimes.
What is the guarantee of a return on an investment like that with a contractor to do something? That's an interesting, I'd never even heard of that kind of business model.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it must work in some situations. Otherwise it wouldn't be a thing, I'm guessing. But I guess that's to be seen.
Yeah. So we're looking into short-term rental conversion.
Yep.
I'd really just like to figure out how we can talk with landlords.
Yeah.
And really have those conversations with, we're probably going to have more success with locally owned landlords.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how can we, honestly, I'd really like to get to the point where it's like, hey, it's a lot of work for you to manage that rental, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of work. What does it look like for us to buy it from you?
Oh, okay.
What does it look like for us to manage it or work with others to manage it?
Yeah.
So I think that's our end goal is really, how can we acquire property for free?
Yep.
How can we acquire property for below market rate? Because that's really going to be our only way to compete as a nonprofit, right?
Right.
That's just the way. And if we want to keep things affordable.
How do you incentivize builders, and what kind of relationship can you have with a builder to incentivize them to do more of these affordable housing projects, whether it's apartment buildings, housing? I know there's Section 8 stuff that they can get incentivized for.
This is a big question here. So I'm a big fan of the organization Strong Towns.
Strong Towns.
Shout out Strong Towns. They do awesome stuff. And they're all about... I was just on my way over here walking. I was listening to one of their episodes about, we often frame this argument as citizens versus developers.
Right.
It's the citizen versus this person that wants to come in and have this big change in our neighborhood. The big change is there because that's the only way it's going to pencil out for them, right? They have to have a certain number of units, has to be a certain scale. They have funders that are maybe from out of state, right? They have money that's like, we want a return. And to get that return, you have to do something radical, right? And Strong Town's thing is we need citizens as developers.
Oh, interesting.
We need folks that are saying, hey, I'd like to build that ADU. I'd like to purchase that lot next to me, put a cottage cluster. I'd like to, have people that are in our town that are the ones that can actually do it, right? Lower the bar for entry for development, because as it is, it's really high to actually the money, the knowledge, that the expertise that goes into actually developing. How can we lower that bar, and how can we have the regulatory standards to go in line with that, right? So how can we make it simple enough on that end to make it, smaller lot sizes, smaller setbacks, height? Like, how can we make it be more creative? So this wasn't really getting to the question that you're going for, but I think
no, this is good.
Working with we need as a community to say, who do we want developing property?
Right.
Do we want big firms from out of state that really need this to pencil by making it 200 units, or do we want to say no? We'd like to see our community mature and grow and have some infill development, and we'd like our friends and family to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because over time, if we just continue to add those units, it's going to be in the fashion that people in this community would like, the whole community character.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more appealing. It's not going to be, look at this radical new development. It's going to be over time, the community is going to start to evolve and change, and there's going to be some infill projects. And so, that's kind of one way to think about it, which appeals to me at least.
Well, it's been interesting to see this community has a lot of homegrown builders that have started here, have become really successful. Malmquist comes to mind. He's a great builder, amazing guy, amazing community member. Yeah, that is a big thing, because we've got these great builders here who know what they're doing. They know what the community looks like and wants. But then you had that lot of controversy over that huge proposed development at the base of Big Mountain that really divided the community. It was this argument, we want more housing, we need more housing, but we don't want it there, It's a YIMBY and a NIMBY going back and forth.
It is this interesting one, and I think those arguments, and this was part of the Strongtown argument too, is that takes away from all the other things we can be doing. When all this attention is focused on, okay, 300 units, it's going to be this massive thing, right? It's taken away from also the conversation of how can we get 2, 3, 4 units at a time in our neighborhoods? How can we allow for people to build ADUs or do something a little bit more creative in their neighborhood and do it inside the city where there's already utilities? We're not having to expand and suburbanize and just grow out.
Right.
And so I think that's part of that challenge too, is as we do grow and concentrate, how do we avoid that radical new 300 unit development that we need? Like, we need it, but we don't want to be beholden to it.
Right.
We don't want to be like begging for that, which sometimes it feels like we're like, no, we really need we really need these developers to come in and build these big developments. And it's like, yes, we do. And we also need folks like Housing Whitefish to come in and build, 20 units.
Yep.
And we also need us to next project, maybe it's only 5.
Yeah.
And that's okay, but we need the incremental growth as well.
And then there's the ecological impact that people are very aware of. We've got, say, farmland. We've got these organizations that are really trying to preserve not just the environment, but the farmlands and all sorts of aspects of our environment where we have all our animals living too. So this greatly impacts them, those corridors where the grizzlies are coming in and out. So that's a big thing too.
That was one of the first things I noticed about moving to Montana. There was 3 things that really came to mind for us. It was casinos, storage units, and dispensaries in the Flathead. Literally, we were driving through, and it was just like, wow, like this is the landscape.
That's so interesting that was
our first, that was our first impression, to be honest. And, coming from Oregon, and people are like, oh, Oregon, but there was some pretty, at the time, I think, innovative growth policy where, all communities needed a physical growth boundary. And the goal was really to preserve farmland and decrease the amount of sprawl. And so if you do go to parts of Oregon, I mean, there are sprawly parts, but on the whole, a lot of it's like community said, this is what the boundary of our city that we'd like to see. We will grow to there. And then after that, we'd really, we'd really like to concentrate development inside of that circle. Yeah. And it's really hard to see the Flathead. It's like, we can see where this is going.
Yeah. Soon between Whitefish and Kalispell, that's going to be our suburbia, really. Because the Whitefish,
it is.
Yeah, it already is. Just look at all those tracks that are being developed, and Whitefish can't really grow out. It's kind of geographically locked. You've got the railroad, the river, the lake. So there's only really one direction to go.
And that's going to be super expensive. If Whitefish, right? Excuse me. If we decide to go over 40 and south, if we're extending utility main under, our state highways, like that's not going to be affordable.
Yeah.
It's just going to be very expensive, in fact. And for the city over time to maintain, like that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just one thing on the regional side. I know we're very, Housing Whitefish, we are focused on whitefish, but we are trying to be part of this conversation at the county level to say, like, how can we start to think about this a little bit different? How can we just not continue to sprawl?
Right.
Because, I grew up in the Denver metro area. And
so you definitely have an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah. And it's ugly.
Oh,
it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And I'd really like for our community to say, like, no, we really do value open space. We really do actually value wildlife corridors. We really do value these things. And so we want to make sure that we can plan accordingly.
Otherwise, you get these just housing developments with your Chili's and your movie theaters, and it's just this footprint of modernity that is just kind of tacky. Consumption junctions, totally. I mean, we all go to Target, we all go to the big box store area over there, and that place is very useful, and we kind of need that centralized hub. But yeah, that's when you get into like places like Texas or the outskirts of these huge cities like Houston or Austin, where that's just all there is.
Yeah. And so I'm going to go back to strong towns because their whole thing is like the whole suburbanization of our country is bankrupting us.
Right.
And it's, I mean, sucking our soul. They don't say that necessarily, but like it's a failed experiment.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a, every community, I mean, when people think about the historic parts of Whitefish and where we want to live, those communities were built in what, the 1910s, 20s, 30s, before the World War, before, we just decided to say, no, we want to grow out, automobile focused. All the cities that generate like the great parts of towns that people want to live in are the historic districts. And their zoning standards, like you couldn't build half the stuff today that you want to live in now.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of this too. I mean, it's all part of this conversation about how do we want to grow as a community,
right?
In the character. And, we have some friends at the Flathead Families for Responsible Growth. And, they're doing a lot of this work about responsible growth. And I just keep asking them what is responsible? Because I think we have different ideas of what that might be.
Yeah, that's very subjective.
And I mean, they've been really helpful and great partners. And like, I think they've, we have some differences of opinion on some things. But at the end of the day, like we want to see Whitefish succeed into the future and be a place where, folks can move and be a ski bum or work at a restaurant. If they like it, maybe they get a better paying job and start a business, buy a house. Like that's been the dream for so many people.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's been fading away over time.
Well, especially when the median house price I just looked up in Whitefish is $853,000 compared to the median house price in Montana, which is $446,000. It's like twice the median.
Well, do you know what it was in 2018? In Whitefish, I think it was either 325 or 350.
OMG. That's insane. That's a peak. And,
can you believe that?
That's 350. What? Let's go back to that. Although something insane would have to happen to drop those prices back to that level. But this is there seems that there's got to be a correction coming, I think. Do we want a correction?
I mean, not if you're in finance.
Yeah, that's touche.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be bad for a lot of people.
It would, yeah.
But yeah, we need some sort of correction.
I think Housing Whitefish is the correction we need.
Man, don't put that all on us.
Just kidding.
No, I mean we we definitely want to.
Yeah.
What I'm saying for us is we want to secure the base.
Yep.
And I haven't been here to have this like whole window of like friends that have left or people that have been priced out.
Sure.
Like I don't have that context, but like I know and I can feel the angst of the community. I can feel that. And I'd also like to provide those opportunities for other folks in the future, because I think the writing's on the wall. Like Whitefish is on the map. Northwest Montana is here to stay, period. In my opinion. Like, one, we have an international airport.
That's getting a huge expansion.
Yeah. As Ed, at the Tap House likes to say, we have a mountain and a lake.
Yeah.
We have both.
Yep.
Lakes.
Yeah.
So I think there's just a lot that, if we don't secure the base and we just are like, yes, it's a free for all, the market's going to keep going up.
Yeah. And this is where it's great that like what Ed's doing with the fish tank, and what we're trying to do here is have these conversations in a variety of formats so that we can come together. Like you said, sometimes people don't want to go to the city council meetings, but this is what's great is we're having these conversations. The more people know about what you're doing, the more people understand how they can get involved, especially if people are moving here with money and they are the new people and they do want to get involved.
They feel guilty.
Yeah, right? But this is good. This is awesome. Is there anything you guys are doing with the county, or is the county trying to address this in any way? I know the county commissioner board is something people have mixed feelings about.
I personally haven't worked with the county. I am working with Community Action Partnerships Northwest Montana, and they have a collaborative housing solutions group.
Okay.
And so, I mean, really the goal of that is ending homelessness in the Flathead.
Yes. Boy, that's another topic.
It really is.
We'll be addressing that, everybody.
Yeah. So, but that's the whole goal, right? But part of that is I'm on this working group, the permanent and supportive housing. And so how do we actually get more housing developed?
Yeah.
So it's really a really great opportunity to just meet affordable housing folks that are doing this work across the county. And what are the strategies that we can work together on, and how can we support each other in different communities?
Yeah.
And how can we each say like, no, this is what we'd like to see.
Yeah.
So I am hopeful that there's going to be, some more conversation with the county commissioners. Again, I haven't quite gotten there yet. And part of that's just our organization is focused on Whitefish.
Yep. And you just moved here.
And I just moved here.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably on my starting to get to my like next layer.
Yeah.
Is really trying to identify like how can we find the commonalities?
Yep.
How do we find those commonalities, and then how do we work from there? How do we work backwards from the things we agree on? Yeah,
that's a good way to look at it. What can the public do to get involved?
There are a lot of things the public can do.
Yeah.
And this one is just like a general shout out towards public engagement. The planning board last week just made some pretty big, or approved to go to council some like pretty big zoning changes. Right?
Really? What kind of changes?
Well, some of them were state mandated.
Okay.
But like adding duplexes, triplexes.
Okay.
To lots.
Sure.
But going to some other standards for like the WR4, the high density residential, going up to 18 units by right, which you're currently at 4. So there were some, taking some parking and making it a little bit less parking, but like some pretty big changes to our zoning code. There wasn't anybody in attendance.
Really?
I wrote my comments. I couldn't go. I was watching my daughter, but
yeah.
I submitted my comments, but there's nobody there.
Oh.
Right. And so that's going to council, and there's some other stuff, but I think like if you care about what your community is going to look like, there's the growth policy stuff that's coming up in August, and there's some really substantial stuff that if you want to have input, like there's going to be some changes coming down the line for how development happens in the state of Montana. 382 was it? There's some bills at the state level that just it's changing the whole process.
Yeah.
And so what we set now in the growth policy is gonna like dictate, and that's gonna be the guiding document. Yeah. And so we need people, if you care about your community, and I know like the time of council isn't always the best, all those things, but like it really is important.
It is. And it's on YouTube. They've got a great YouTube channel too.
They do. So I think just on a basic level, like be an engaged citizen.
Yep. Agreed.
Like just be engaged, like do the research.
Yeah. Like
understand what's going on. And specifically for Housing Whitefish, I'll start with businesses. Like if you're in the business community, we'd love to talk with you about rounding up. What does it look like to, if you're a realtor, make a contribution at closing?
Oh, right? Yeah.
If you're an insurance folk, what does it look like when you sign on a new person for a new policy? Make a contribution. We'd really like to just like involve the community in what we're doing. And, I think for me, if you're involved in real estate at this time and you're part of a transaction, I feel like you should make a contribution.
Yeah, that's great.
So and I understand realtors have,
yep.
That's how they make a living.
Totally. Yeah.
So like that's one area where we really will be starting to go out and saying, hey, what does it look like for you to round up for housing? How can you engage there?
Yeah.
That's on that side. I'd say on the individual side, I mean, if you are able to contribute, we'll be part of the Greatfish.
Oh, good. When does that start?
August 10th or 11th.
Great program for people that don't know. The Greatfish Challenge, the Whitefish Community Foundation matches what every organization raises.
Yep. They match up to a percentage. I
gotta
make
sure.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes. There's the logistics on there, but yeah. So we're part of the Greatfish Community Challenge. I got to say the full thing.
Yeah.
Greatfish Community Challenge. So we're going to be part of that. So like if you are in a position to actually make a financial contribution, we obviously love that support. That just supports our work. I'd say if you're a property owner, we'd love to talk to you about what does it look like to rent. If you're a renter or have rentals, what does it look like to rent local? Right? If you have a short term, right? And if you're already renting to somebody local, how can we look to make it more affordable if it's not currently affordable? If you are a property owner and you live within the city and you don't need the retirement income, your home is bought off, what does it look like to leave us in your will? Leave us your home.
That's amazing.
Like, and that's a big thing. That's a big ask, but
that is a big ask, but it can't hurt to ask.
My thing on this is there's been a lot of people I've talked to that are like, my kids can't afford to come back and live here. My kids can't buy a home. How much did you buy your home for? $100,000, $120,000. Even 5 years ago, $315,000, right? If we're not securing property now for the long term, if people aren't leaving us their homes or donating us their homes or selling them at a steep discount, there's no way that we're going to sell those homes to everyday folks that want to come live in Whitefish, move home, or seek an opportunity and take a job opportunity in a place that they'd really love to live.
Especially when other people are more than willing to come sweep that up for $1 million and turn it into a short-term rental.
Yes. So there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I'd say just, call, email, follow us on social media. Like we're really at a point as an organization where this last year was our first full fiscal year.
Yeah.
And so we definitely have a clear path with our projects and our programs. And we're still just kind of like developing our voice, I think, a little bit on how we're engaging with the community. So definitely if there's people that are like, I could help out with that branding, or I could help out with the talking points. Like we'd love to just engage and just like get more people involved.
That's amazing. And you've only been here a year and it seems like you've done quite a bit. So that's awesome. It's rad to have you as a new community member, brother.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No,
why do you do this? Like is there something, is this like a moral thing? Or are you just interested in this? Or are you just like, I just know how to do this. So this is what I want to do.
That's a good question.
Because you worked for Habitat for Humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Been working in nonprofits since I graduated college.
Okay.
And, I think for me, one, my parents, my mom was a school psychologist. So she was always, service, and my parents were engaged in the community. But I think just for me, there's just always been part of like wanting to help and give back. And I feel like there's just kind of been other stuff honestly hasn't interested me in many ways. Like just like when I started to like go through career paths, and it was like looking at all the options that I had, like the stuff that I just gravitated to that I found the most interesting to work on and think about and engage on were just issues around, people and people that aren't necessarily thriving, and what are the challenges that people are facing in their everyday.
Yeah.
I think for me, a big part of this too, that it's like my soft spot here, but just like kids, like I just feel like kids deserve a safe and stable place to call home.
Mm-hmm.
And like I, was in education in that world for a while. And, for me, like that's just like a huge thing. Like I feel like there'd be so many, our country and our communities would be so much better for the short term and long term if we just like helped people like have housing. Right? And kids.
Yeah.
Like if we just like could let kids have a place they could grow up and have a room. Like I just feel like there would be so many like things that would be better in our society.
It totally would. It's better economically if they can put more money, if not so much money is going towards rent, that can go to so many other things.
Yeah.
Just get circulated in the community more. the stronger the community will be when you, like you said, we help those who aren't thriving, like those who are thriving, if they can help the ones who aren't, just better for the community as a whole.
Yeah.
So.
I think, on the personal level, like I have 2 parents that, are married and support support our family and have always been like, yes, like how can we help? And their parents did the same for them. And so it's just kind of been in my family. And so like, it took me a long time to realize that wasn't the norm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, honestly, like, and that's like, privilege that I, had as a child and teenager. And like, was really once I started to like pick my head up and like have experiences in the world, was like, wow, like I had it pretty good, and just like, I want, I don't want people to be like, oh, I want my childhood or like replicate that. But I just want people to be able to have, a life that they want to live and like have the opportunities. And I just feel like the opportunities for, us and our kids are shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
And other folks, like I just feel like there's opportunity, and maybe all generations feel this, like, like it's going to be really hard, but I'd like to see more opportunities. And just for me, housing is at the core of that.
Oh, that's so true. Growing up here, that was a big part of our community. Like you said, is everyone just helped each other. And it was never a question about, how are you going to then help me back? Because it always came back around. I mean, I can think of a million instances where our family needed help. Our family was able to help other families. And back then, the town was like tiny in the 80s, probably more like 4,000, maybe 5,000. But that's what really made Whitefish great. And same thing, when I moved out of Whitefish and went to the cities and other places, like I was like, dang, this is totally different. So it's cool that it's amazing that our community is really trying to retain that and adapt to it. I think there's just a lot of adaptation that we understand we need. And sometimes adapting is painful, but I'm grateful that we have people like you that are helping us to do all that. So, will you come back and kind of keep us updated on what we can do?
Hey, I'd be happy to. And, hopefully this time next year we're underway on construction.
Rad.
And we have an up and running program and we're looking at the next thing. So
that'll be so cool to hear about.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And then as far as voting comes, what's the voting situation that we all should be aware of this fall?
Yes. So on August 7th, the council will approve the ballot language. Hopefully they should.
Yep.
Approve the ballot language that will go to voters. And really that's going to be 10% for community housing.
Cool.
Right. So I want people to, hopefully not touching property tax rebates. I even just saw some comments. The Beacon posted just $27 million for community housing.
Yeah.
Read some of the comments and it was like, well, that money should be going towards roads. How are we going to trust the government to do anything with that money?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to be clear, like this isn't taking more money from the community.
Yeah.
This is money that's already being collected.
Yep.
And we're just reallocating how we'd like to spend it as a community.
As a community.
So this is the opportunity for voters to say, we want to support housing and we want to support housing for the folks that can't afford to live here otherwise.
Yeah.
And so that's really the key is we want 10% of the resort tax to go towards community housing. And we think you should want that too.
And there's some exciting ways that you've laid out that'll get done. So
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel, so much for all your hard work. And we can't wait to see what happens in the future.
And thank you for highlighting all the awesome stuff going on. I feel like there's been some really awesome people on your show so far. So I'm like, man, I hope I can live up and, fill some airtime here.
You have indeed. So looking forward to having you back again.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hello.